Hello and welcome back. Thanks for watching Westferry Times. I'm Emily, and today we're diving straight into, well, the pretty fascinating world of UK local politics, especially after those 2025 elections. We're looking specifically at what's going on in councils where no single party actually has a majority, these hung councils.
Mm.
Our mission today, pretty simple, really. Figure out who's actually leading these places and what it means for how things get done in your local area when there isn't one clear winner.
Yeah, it's a really crucial part of the political picture right now, Emily.
Yeah.
And it definitely has real consequences for communities up and down the country.
Exactly. And helping us make sense of it all, we're really pleased to have our expert guest back with us. He's a seasoned political analyst, knows the ins and outs of local government incredibly well. It's great to have you here.
Thanks. Always good to be back.
Okay, let's jump right in then. For anyone listening, what exactly is a hung council? Can you give us the basic definition?
Sure. So at its core, a hung council is what happens when, after the votes are counted in a local election, no single political party wins enough seats to have an outright majority. Think of it like, well, a council chamber where no one group controls more than half the seats.
Right. More than half is the key.
Precisely. And that immediately means they can't just push their own agenda through easily. They need, they need help from others.
So if no one's got that clear control, how do these councils actually work? I mean, how do they make decisions day to day?
Well, the parties have to find ways to cooperate. Often you'll see coalitions form. That's where two or maybe more parties make a formal deal to back each other on key votes, key policies. Or the other main way is a minority administration. That's usually the largest single party trying to govern. But they have to, actively seek support from other parties pretty much every time there's a significant vote.
Like for the budget, maybe?
Absolutely. The budget's a classic example. Or big planning decisions,
Yeah.
local regulations. They need cross-party support, vote by vote sometimes.
Okay. And how common are hung councils in the UK? Was this big jump after the 2025 elections really unusual, or is it something we see fairly often?
Well, hung councils themselves aren't exactly rare, especially at the local level. You often get more parties winning seats locally than you might nationally.
Mm.
But what was striking about 2025 was the significant increase in the number of them. It definitely felt like a shift.
A shift in voter sentiment, perhaps.
It certainly suggests that, yeah. Maybe a move away from automatically backing one of the two main parties in quite so many places. A kind of fragmentation.
That's a really interesting point. So let's dig into those 2025 local elections then. What were the big results that sort of fed into this rise in hung councils?
Yeah, the results were quite telling. We saw pretty substantial seat losses for both the Labour and the Conservative parties nationally.
Which suggests maybe some voter dissatisfaction, or maybe just looking elsewhere.
Could be a bit of both. Yeah,
Absolutely.
it certainly opened the door for other parties.
And did other parties step through that door? Who saw gains?
Oh, definitely. Reform UK, for example, had a really strong showing. They didn't just gain seats, they actually won overall control in several councils. That's a big development. Signals their growing influence.
Right. Taking overall control is a step beyond just gaining seats.
Absolutely. And we also saw the Liberal Democrats boosting their numbers, too, making noticeable gains in representation, particularly in areas like, say, Oxfordshire and Cambridgeshire.
Okay, so if the big two are losing seats and these other parties, like Reform and the Lib Dems, are gaining, well, it makes sense you'd end up with more councils where nobody has that magic 50% plus one number.
Exactly. The math's just worked out that way in more places.
Mhm.
The inability of any single party to get a clear majority led directly to this uptick in hung councils we're talking about. It's a direct result of how people voted.
Okay, so we understand what they are and why we suddenly have more of them. Let's look at some specific examples. Can you maybe point to a council or two that ended up hung after 2025?
Yeah.
And perhaps tell us who's trying to run things there now?
Sure, Hertfordshire's a good example. After the elections, the Liberal Democrats actually became the largest single party on the council there.
Okay, so they won the most seats.
They did, but, and this is the crucial bit, they didn't win enough for that overall majority. So Hertfordshire became a hung council.
And what does that typically mean for policymaking in a place like Hertfordshire?
Well, it often means the party in charge, even if it's the largest, has to focus on things they think they can get broader agreement on, maybe less controversial stuff. It can sometimes mean that the really big, perhaps more ideologically driven projects get delayed because getting consensus is just harder. For you, as a resident, that could mean maybe slower progress on certain issues where the parties just fundamentally disagree.
That makes sense. Compromise becomes the name of the game. What about another example? Cornwall, perhaps. You mentioned them earlier.
Yes, Cornwall had a similar outcome. No overall majority, but a different party ended up largest. There, it was Reform UK who came out with the most seats.
But again, not enough for full control.
Exactly the same situation as Hertfordshire in that respect. Largest party, yes, but still short of that crucial majority threshold. So another Hung council.
So, how are these councils, like Hertfordshire and Cornwall, actually managing things day to day? What does it look like on the ground when no one party is fully in the driving seat?
It does vary,
Mm.
but like we said, it usually boils down to either a minority administration or some kind of power-sharing deal.
Mm-hmm.
If we take Hertfordshire again, the Lib Dems are currently leading as a minority administration.
Okay.
So they hold the main leadership positions. They set the broad direction for things like local services or planning policy. But it's a big, but they have to constantly work to persuade councillors from other parties to vote with them.
Especially on those big ticket items like the budget again.
Definitely. The budget is key. They need to negotiate, find compromises, build relationships, behind the scenes with counselors from labor, conservatives, maybe Greens or independents, whoever else is there. Sometimes these arrangements are quite formal, like a written coalition agreement with shared policies. Other times it's looser, maybe a confidence and supply deal, where another party agrees just to back them on the really crucial votes, like the budget and confidence motions, but maybe not much else.
It really shines a light on needing political flexibility, doesn't it? And that skill of finding common ground. It must be such a different way of working compared to just having a majority and pushing things through.
It absolutely is. And what's quite interesting, I think, is seeing how these different political views have to interact. They have to find some middle way, or at least enough common ground to keep essential services running for the local community.
Which could potentially lead to more balanced decisions, considering more viewpoints.
Potentially, yes. That's the positive spin. It forces different perspectives into the room and into the final decision-making process.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit now. Thinking about this growing trend of hung councils across the UK, what are the bigger implications? What does it sort of tell us about where our politics is at right now?
Well, if you look at the bigger picture, I think this rise in Hun councils really does signal a kind of um, fragmentation of those traditional political loyalties we talked about.
Mhm.
It suggests voters might be more willing now to shop around, politically speaking, at the local level, looking beyond just the two main parties.
A desire for more diverse representation,
I
perhaps.
think that's definitely part of it, yeah.
Mhm.
People wanting their council to reflect a wider range of views present in the community.
And looking forward then, do you see this trend continuing, more home councils in future elections? Could it even happen more at the national level?
Based on the current voting patterns we're seeing and the sort of shifts we've discussed, it's certainly a strong possibility. If voters keep spreading their support across a wider field of parties, then yes, we could absolutely see more councils ending up without a clear majority. And as you say, potentially future national parliaments too. That would require a really fundamental rethink about how government works, wouldn't it?
Definitely. Coalition building, cross-party deals becoming the norm rather than the exception.
Exactly. It forces a different approach to governance. And that raises a really interesting question for you listening at home. How good do you think the different parties in your local area would actually be at finding that common ground, at working together effectively if they had to?
That's a really key question for all of us to think about, isn't it? Especially as we look at the future locally and maybe nationally too. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today. This has been a really, really insightful deep dive into hung councils.
My pleasure. It's a really important part of how our democracy is working, or sometimes struggling to work right now. I hope it's been useful.
It certainly has. And thank you, too, for joining us on this deep dive here on Westferry Times. We really hope you found it useful. As you think about this possibility of more coalition politics, maybe consider how these different ways of governing might actually play out in your own community. Do you see it leading to more collaboration, better decisions, or maybe just, well, more arguments and potential gridlock? Something to think about. Until next time, goodbye for now.